we are going to go ahead and do a GitHub demo and specifically talk about how to connect RStudio and Git and get all of that together to push to GitHub. So I mentioned that there is a link in the syllabus to the Git cheat sheet. I would highly recommend getting started with that. And that is going to take you to this website right here. That is by Dr. R and and this is the Git cheat sheet that I use when we have new people coming into the lab. And so the first thing you need to do, and you need to do this only once, is to configure your Git and get it to work with R. So mine is already configured, so I'm not going to be able to show you this directly. But you can use it from the R console. You'll need to use the use this package. So if you don't have the use this package, you'll need to install it. So you'll use this, and then you will do use git config. And there you're going to put your username and your user email for GitHub. Okay? So your username and your user email for GitHub. After you've done that, you will also, it says to also use this git vaccinate, so just go ahead and do that. And you can check on your current status of your Git with use this git sitrep. So I'm going to go ahead and just show you that right now. So we'll do git sitrep. And you can see that it has my name is there and my email address. And these are all the settings that I already have for this project, or for not this project, for my RStudio. So all of mine is already set up, okay? Then you are going to need to create what's called a GitHub access token, or a personal access token on GitHub. So if you do use this create GitHub token, it's going to pop up a place to create a personal access token. You'll want to go ahead, and I give myself as many permissions as possible. So make sure that you have enough personal scopes. And I might set mine to not expire for a long time, knowing that I'm going to still use this. So copy the personal access token, because you're going to then need to get it back into GitHub. So from here, so for instance, if I use this create GitHub token, it would take me to a place where I could create a GitHub token. I'm not going to, but it will. You can see it'll pop up this, and then it'll confirm my my GitHub access and take me to a place where I can do that. So again, this is like just need to do this once, and once you're done, it should be good to go. You don't have to do it again on a new computer, or on the same computer. The next thing is to initialize a GitHub repo and then sync it up with GitHub. So you can do this in a lot of different ways, but the way that I think is the easiest way to do it is I like to create the GitHub, the Git repository first, and then sync it up with a new project. So let's practice that right now. So I have our PHS 650 organization here. So I'm going to create a new repository. And I'm going to try to continue to use the Taylor Swift data. So I'm going to call it Taylor Examples. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and keep that as a private repository for myself, and I am going to have no template and nothing here. So I am just going to go create repository. I'm not going to add any, I'm not going to initialize it with anything. So just create repository. And then you see I have this information and this this here. So what I can do now is to, it says push an existing repository from the command line, or I can go to my GitHub or my RStudio. I'm going to then make a new project in RStudio. And I am going to say I'm going to check out a project from a version control directory and use git. And then the one that this is going to be the repository URL. And I'm just going to put it on my desktop. Okay. So now I have a new project and it is connected with, hopefully, this GitHub repo. Okay. So you can see that I just have two files in here. One is my R project file and one is my gitignore file. Okay. So now what I'm going to do, and this is still, you know, pretty empty in here. And so nothing in here. What I am going to do now is I am going to start a new Quarto document. And we are in this project. I'll go ahead and save it. And just title it Taylor Examples. In class examples from the TS data. Right, so I just have basically a blank QMD file. But I have some new things here. So you can see now I have 3 files that if I go to the Git tab over here, I have 3 files that I have question marks by. And so if I look here, it says they're untracked currently. And what that means is that currently these files are not in that repository. What I'm going to do here is I can check that I want to stage them, and then the status turns to added. So they're staged. And what that means is I'm saying next time I make a commit, I want to add these files to my repository. And then I'm going to hit commit. And you can do this you can also do this on the terminal, or you can do it via this kind of pop-up window in R. I find the pop-up windows useful when I'm only doing it occasionally, or can use if I'm doing a bunch of files at the same time. I might prefer the terminal, but whatever you want to do. So I'm going to write a commit message called init, because this is the first one I'm doing, so this is just I'm initializing this repository with these 3 files. And I am going to go ahead and push commit. So what this means is that now these files are in my local repository and they're committed. So they're on my computer and they're committed in this local repository. What they are not, though, is if I go back to here and I refresh this, they're still not here. And what that is I need to do one more thing for them to show up, and that is I need to push them. So I need to push these files using that, and I can use that button. You can also use a git push in the terminal. Either way will work, and so you can see that this just pushed the head of my branch here to that main branch in the repository. And now, oh look, I have the Taylor Swift data here, and it's all now on GitHub. So pretty cool. So now if you wanted to see that, you could go to my GitHub repository and see, for instance, this QMD file and what it says here. Okay? So now let's talk about the next phase, which is what if I make a change here. So I am going to insert some R code and okay, so say that I wanted to see what the color palette was for the Evermore album. I can call this here and then say that I want to have see what the colors are for Evermore, and it shows them here. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and save that again. And you notice that as soon as I save that, I get something that says modified here in my Taylor examples thing. And that's because I just modified this, right? I just saved it. So in order for this to be updated on GitHub, I'm going to have to do those steps that I just did in the init, which is I'm going to have to save it, commit it, put the commit message, color palette data, commit, and then what do I have to do last? Well, I have to push. So I just pushed. So now if I go back to the GitHub, you can see here I now have that new example there. Now you can, if I ever wanted to look back and see, oh, actually I didn't really want to do that, or I wanted to see what the file looked like before, I can actually go and look at the history in here by this history button, and it will show, okay, the first thing I did was do the init, and then I added in the color palette data, and I can look at either one of those files. So this is what I mean by vertical versioning, right? So this is what was done in the first commit, and then in the second commit, this is all that was done. So I can see exactly what was done and exactly the files there. All right, so we've done some pushing, some committing. I'm not going to worry about pulling right now. We'll get to that later. But if someone else has made a change and you're collaborating with someone else, then before you commit and push, you're going to want to pull in their changes. So pull in before you make any changes in order to avoid merge conflicts. Again, we're going to talk about it later. We're going to talk about it more. But just a heads up. So let's now talk about the gitignore file. So I use the gitignore file fairly often. So what this means is that if there are some files that you have in here that you don't want to push to GitHub, you can put those in the gitignore file, and they'll still be in your local repository on your computer, but they're not going to get pushed to GitHub. So I do this a lot with when I have data that I'm working with that cannot be publicly uploaded or in the public domain. I might put in, okay, I don't want to have my data file or my data folder. So if I created, for instance, a data folder that I did not want to go in here, so I'm going to call it data, and then I am going to, it doesn't do anything if you just have an empty folder. So let's put like an empty Excel file in here, huh? So I'm going to call it sensitive data and put that in my Taylor examples and data. All right. so now you can see that I have this sensitive data file, and it showed up on my Git, but I don't want it to actually push to GitHub, and I don't want to accidentally do that. So what I'm going to do here is go ahead and put data, as in that folder, as something that I don't want to push to Git accidentally. And then I'm going to save it. Okay. And you can see here that it changed it, so the data file no longer shows up here, but instead I've updated the git ignore file, and I want to go ahead and commit that to say I don't want to accidentally push to GitHub anything in my data file. And I do that. There we go, and I can go ahead and push it. Okay. So we just did a kind of whirlwind tour of the GitHub and how to work on GitHub, how to get your repository set up, how to do some initial pushing and pulling, and do that all within R. So we are going to work on this more in class, but feel free to go ahead and get started and do some practice before we do that. All right.